to enable rapid and expeditionary operations, and you can kind of hit on all of those buzzwords. But then what you realize is it doesn't matter how many tools you have, if it actually doesn't remove or reduce cognitive burden or mental fatigue, what is it actually really doing? So you can build all the hardware that you want, but if you don't change the way that you control it, you're still just adding more tools to the toolbox, right? And so that's where we've really tried to understand the market and go down the path and say, okay, we have products, we have technology, we have tools. What is the real future of that? And from our perspective, the real future is not just adding more platforms to the market, but it's really how do you control them? And not just control the platforms that we build, but control all the platforms to really unify the ability for our end users.
Welcome to the Future of GovCon. This is a weekly podcast to bring together experts from across the industry and look at what's happening today and how it's going to impact the future of our industry. I'm Jake Frazer. I'm the owner and CEO of Precision Talent Solutions. Leading one of the industry's top executive search firms, I get to talk to influencers every day. C-suite executives, board members, growth leaders, top government officials, military flag officers. And on this podcast, what we're doing is we're bringing in these experts from AI, from space, from medical, from logistics, from engineering. And we're sitting down and talking about what's happening in their specific area of the industry and how it will impact the future. So pour a cup of coffee and let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Future of GovCon. It's great to have you here. We have a lot of different types of guests on the show, and today we have a real exciting gov tech, defense tech entrepreneur who's joining us all the way from Arizona. Callie, welcome to the Future of GovCon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
My team was talking about the name, and it's important to also to have young, high potential, high growth leaders like you that are actually defining the future of the industry. And you're in a very cool space around the UAS and the AI space that's really developing quickly. So it's good to have you here.
Well, thank you. I try to help define it. I know that there are several others doing the same. So it's a distinct honor to kind of be a part of that ecosystem.
Absolutely. So Callie is she's an entrepreneur. We'll get into her background here shortly. I'm going to give her a few minutes to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the things you're working on right now.
Absolutely. So I've spent the last 10 years in defense tech, building autonomous systems, both on the fixed wing side as well as the multi-rotor side. And where we really play in this space is really understanding the capability gaps, trying to rapidly produce, rapidly prototype, and then deliver cost-effective and efficient platforms to our end users.
So why does this matter to our audience? We deal with a lot of government folks and military folks and some of the bigger C-suite, but it's good to bring in the perspective of someone that doesn't necessarily come from the industry, but has been able to come in and build a brand and build a product and also build technology that is synchronized with kind of the latest developments in defense tech. And so we're going to talk today about everything from fundraising, venture capital. We're going to talk about product development, and we're going to get that perspective from someone who has literally gone out to the field and gotten customer feedback and built a product that is innovative, it's different, and it's helping define what's going on now in GovTech.
Absolutely.
So before we get I want to hear about your background. You're a CEO, you're an entrepreneur, an MBA, you're a cattle farmer, you're a mentor, you're a coach, you're so many things. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about your kind of career arc. How'd you get started, and talk about your pivot into government contracting?
Absolutely. So you want to start with kind of where I grew up and
growing up.
All of this?
You in Chisholm County, or what's
absolutely.
Let's talk about growing up.
So I grew up in a very small town in southeastern Arizona called Cerro Vista. It is home of Fort Huachuca, which is the Center for Army Intelligence. I'm sure a lot of your viewers know the installation. And my
brother did his advanced course there. Actually, I met him.
What a small world! Yeah, what a small world. And, my family, they were kind of pillars of the community. My father built the branch campus in Sierra Vista for the University of Arizona. It was known as the University of Arizona South. And what that did was it provided the second 2 years of a bachelor's degree to rural Arizonans, so they didn't have to leave the community in order to obtain a bachelor's degree. So he was very instrumental in providing higher education to the region. And then he also served as the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army for the state of Arizona. So in addition to higher education and being in that field, he was very, very instrumental in advocating for Fort Huachuca, for our installation here in our community, but also for our troops in the state of Arizona. My mom was a microbiologist and medical technologist. She started the first laboratory in our community hospital in the 1970s. And then she went on to take a major passion in horticulture and started teaching the Master Gardener program from the University of Arizona in Cochise County. So in addition to her microbiology expertise, she can also rattle off the Latin name for every single plant in the high desert off
That's
the overhead.
That's handy to have.
For some people, it very much is. Yeah.
So you got some good genetics. Talk a little bit about, so your dad is advocating and helping the state of Arizona do what? To expand for Fort Huachuca to be more relevant? Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So for the better part of, I believe it's 20 years, and I'm sure if he listens to this, he'll give me the exact date that I should have said. But he was appointed as the civilian aide for the state of Arizona under 3 governors. And what that position does is it's the civilian liaison advocating for military, the families, veterans, and so forth, and making sure that all of these families and our troops have the services and access to amenities that they need within our state. He was a major advocate during the BRAC process, so anything that ever had to do with sequestration of Fort Huachuca. He was a major advocate against that, wrote many white papers that were published throughout the Pentagon, lobbied multiple times, multiple years with Senator John McCain for advocacy and support in the state of Arizona for our installations. And while he predominantly focused on Fort Huachuca, the ramifications of helping support Fort Huachuca and its stability in the region really had a ripple effect throughout the state of Arizona with the advancement of technology, capability, and so forth.
Did you ever get to meet John McCain?
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Cool guy.
Wonderful.
I met him.
Yeah.
I met him at a WEF event in Jordan and drank beer, and he loves baseball. We just talked about baseball all night. Really cool.
Isn't it funny how you connect with people in the littlest things? You think it would be this kind of like grandiose topic that you would discuss, and yet it's those little things that make you human that you really connect on.
That's all he wanted to talk about was baseball.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Arizona. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There's some good people coming out of there. So you were around DOD talk, around the table. You've heard about it at a young age, I guess, right?
So yes and no. I was around the talk of our troops, the strength of our military, and really understanding the power of supporting our troops and our soldiers. I was not anywhere around actual defense contracting, and neither was my father. He was in defense a few years ago when he retired from the University of Arizona as a vice president. However, it wasn't until my career that I really got immersed into the defense industry. All of my experience more was from a community and civic perspective, and how do you advocate for the people that protect our, freedom, liberty, and democracy.
All right. And so you went to U of A, I assume. Sounds like it's pretty strong gene, both undergrad and grad, right?
I did, yes. The undergrad was almost a non-negotiable, right? Like that was kind of the path that I was going into. Not to mention, I'm a total family girl, and I wanted to be able to stay close to my family. We're very, very connected. And then I graduated from the University of Arizona with degrees in Chinese and international diplomacy. And then I went back a few years later very strategically because the University of Arizona's master's program, the MBA, had a pathway to an entrepreneurship program, which at the time which is a very well-ranked program. It's called the McGuire Center for Entrepreneurship. And so I very much wanted to go back to the U of A, not only because it was geographically convenient for me. I was living in Tucson, but I really wanted to attend the entrepreneurship program.
Awesome. And you still practicing? Are you doing Mandarin or Cantonese? What's your?
So it was Mandarin. I studied abroad in Nanjing, China. I had the idea when I graduated from undergrad. I actually thought that maybe I would end up somewhere in financial markets or maybe even diplomacy. At the time, this was 2009, and that was when we had a lot of that political rhetoric that China was the sleeping dragon and it was going to overtake the world. But that was really the height of that political rhetoric. And I thought, well, why not understand the language and the culture of what could be one of our biggest powers, right? Economic powers, military powers, whatever it may be against the United States. And I very much pursued that. I thought I was going to go to law school. And then I kind of had a shift in my perspective. I liked more innovation. I liked more the ability to build and grow something. I also realized that policy and procedure was kind of the antithesis of who I was. I didn't want to be a politician. And so I wanted to kind of have this entrepreneurial spirit. And that's when I shifted courses away from trying to go to law school and instead got my master's in business strategy and entrepreneurship.
So what was your first exposure to the government contracting industry? When did you decide that's the direction you want to go?
Let me tell you, Jake, it was not a decision. It was all complete happenstance. So I graduated from the University of Arizona. I worked for Microsoft while I was in school as a change management consultant. And I really didn't enjoy at the time the big corporations. I wanted to be more nimble, more agile, and like I said, more entrepreneurial. When I graduated from the program, I actually got a call from a fellow entrepreneur in the Tucson area. And he said, you may not know me. I saw you in one of your case competitions. Would you like to come talk to me about a potential opportunity? And at the time, there was some intellectual property on a Group 3 aircraft that had been designed for the Air Force Research Lab that was for sale in Tucson, Arizona. And he looked at me and he said, do you want to go after this? And do you want to see what kind of company we can build for autonomous systems? And Jake, I could not have told you what a UAS was. I didn't know the acronym. I didn't know the first thing about DoD contracting. I didn't know FAR. I didn't know anything. When I say an outsider, I was a complete outsider. Not to mention, you didn't hear engineering anywhere in my background, right?
Yeah, right.
And I'm just one of those people that I say yes, and I'll figure out how to do it. And I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew that I wanted to at least try to build something that was kind of truly innovative. So this was now 2015. The concept of attritable low-cost platforms, that was nowhere on anybody's radar, right? It was very, very much focused on legacy systems and higher cost systems. And I came in and I started asking every single question I could. And when I kind of had this laundry list of everything that everybody said were their problems and their capability gaps, it kept boiling down to, we need cost-effective, simple solutions. And that is what I said, okay, I'll figure out what that means, and kind of went down the road of product development and really understanding how do I solve that problem, but still make it in the industry.
And this is before drones and UASs were so ubiquitous, right? We're talking 11 years ago, right? Before Ukraine, before all this. So you're way ahead of your time.
Long before. AeroVironment was the biggest competitor, right? We were starting to build fixed wing. There was a major capability gap in the market on fixed wing, longer endurance platforms that were still single person operable, single person transportable. There were a lot of quadcopter companies in the space at the time, and ever since, the majority of them actually are not with us today. I kind of say, we were trying to build attritable aircraft before the DOW came up with the word attritable in, 2021 and 2022.
Yeah, that now you're in one of the hottest spots in defense tech.
Yeah, which is cool, and then it's also a very interesting dynamic how much it's changed since 2015 to 2018 to now 2026. So happy to be in here, but I'm very much interested and curious about the rapidly changing dynamics of what the defense tech industry is right now.
I heard you talking about kind of moving away from like pure product and this kind of the human machine learning concept, right? It's not.
Yes.
It used to be about building a good drone, but now you got to really talk about how the operator interfaces and learns and receives information.
Absolutely. I think what it boils down to is you try to build a capability to simplify their jobs, right? To enable rapid and expeditionary operations, and you can kind of hit on all of those buzzwords. But then what you realize is it doesn't matter how many tools you have if it actually doesn't remove or reduce cognitive burden or mental fatigue. What is it actually really doing? So you can build all the hardware that you want, but if you don't change the way that you control it, you're still just adding more tools to the toolbox, right? And so that's where we've really tried to understand the market and go down the path and say, okay, we have products, we have technology, we have tools. What is the real future of that? And from our perspective, the real future is not just adding more platforms to the market, but it's really how do you control them? And not just control the platforms that we build, but control all the
All of
platforms
them.
to really unify the ability for our end users.
You describe yourself, you're a Chinese major, right? But you describe yourself as a scrappy engineer. So how did you learn anything about building aircraft?
Yeah. I want to be very careful of saying scrappy engineer because all of the true engineers that have spent decades perfecting their craft and skill would probably take offense to this. I say scrappy engineer because I have learned a lot of engineering on the job, trial and error from the engineers that have worked with me over the last few years. So when I say scrappy, I mean, I've had the ability to learn a lot of materials. I can talk to material science research, not at a subject matter expert level, but I can really talk to it at the 50,000 foot view. I know how to build. I know how to assemble. I'm a whiz with fixing anything with Gorilla duct tape. But I mostly have, I say all of that jokingly, but mostly I've had the fortunate opportunity to go into the field with actual end users and have them walk us step by step by saying, hey, here's why this doesn't work, right? So when I'm kneeling in a field with nods on and gloves on in the middle of the night, here's why I can't use 3 different tools to screw in a wing set. And so I kind of claim this scrappiness because we've been able to take a lot of capabilities, a lot of mechanisms, a lot of designs from other industries and use them in our product development that are not typical aerospace designs, right? They're not typical, highly complex or intricate mechanical mechanisms. It's more of what actually works, and can we take a design from a jewelry box, so to speak, and add that to a wing to make that easier for the end user. So I jokingly say scrappy because a lot of our designs are not conventional, but they work, and that's what they want.
So you've had some success. You got on a big Army IDIQ, right? Big $250 million IDIQ. You've learned the acquisition process, which is, I've grown up in it. I think a lot of people have, and you've had to learn this crazy procurement process working with the federal government. How did you figure that out on your own?
It was all trial and error.
Oof.
For every success, yes. If I could show you the amount of scar tissue that I've developed from getting knocked down 100 times, but by getting up 101, I mean, it's pretty intense and it's pretty thick. For every success that I've had in this industry, I've had probably 25 failures and catastrophic failures, right? Not just, oh, okay, that was tough, but we'll kind of get through it. Catastrophic failures where we've had aircraft go down in front of people you didn't want the aircraft going down in front of. Lawsuits, bad team members. I've spent money in ways that I shouldn't have spent because I just didn't know what I didn't know. So it has all been trial by error and trial and error. And it's one of those things that when you get into this space, especially at the time that I got into this space, you kind of have to have a real, what my father calls a come to Jesus meeting with yourself. And you say, how long are you going to be in this? Because this isn't just, a quick thing. This is an endurance run. And so that was kind of the talk that I'd have with myself at the beginning. Then you say, okay, you may want to quit, but you just never quit. Like I said,
The barriers. Those are the barriers to entry, right? It's grit. It's a willingness to learn this kind of arcane procurement process and a passion for a product, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, talking about the procurement process, it's changing a lot, especially with this new administration.
Yes.
It's a different approach. It's not your put out a big long sales cycle, RFP, answer questions, industry days. But now we're going into more nimble, supposedly faster, more efficient acquisition processes with OTAs and direct awards. Well, probably less direct awards than we had in the past, but yeah, but the acquisition process is changing. What are you doing to stay up with that? How do you adapt to this the new way of doing procurements?
You know, I find that the best information comes from the relationships I've been able to establish. Because the procurements are very different across all of the different military entities and agencies I'm personally seeing right now. The way that the Navy is buying is very different than the way that Army is buying, and so forth. And especially when you're talking about some of these OTAs and we're talking about some of these more tech accelerators, every single approach is a little bit different. And what I'm also finding is that every single person's perspective behind the approach is also very different. It is a little bit of a drinking from a fire hose right now, and you've got to be able to adapt to all of the idiosyncrasies of those different agencies and say, okay, this is what I know they're wanting right now, and then how do I change that for how how this other agency is looking. It's a little intense, right? Trying to kind of stay on top of it. And then it really kind of depends on how you're positioning your company and in the marketplace and how they're perceiving you.
What do you think about some of the outside investors that are now coming into defense tech? I mean, 10 years ago, it was maybe some private equity, but, a lot of government funded programs. Now you have venture capitalists come in and more private equity. How's that impacting kind of the acquisition process?
It's interesting. It's very interesting. So the way that I'm seeing a lot of this is the government right now is using venture capital to almost de-risk procurement and contracts. Historically, as you very well know, contracts were awarded based on past performance, pedigree, team formation, capability, your back-end infrastructure, right? Did you have the proper accounting system to be able to handle this kind of contract, or were you on a government contracting vehicle, and so forth? Now, what I'm really seeing is none of that actually matters. The way that the government is really looking at potential vendors coming in is their media presence. Are they venture backed? And what they're doing is, it seems like they're assuming that the venture capital firm did all of the due diligence, and if they invested, then therefore they believe in the team and the technology, and then therefore that is a de-risk to the government. And so, okay, we're going to trust this. We actually submitted to an Army X-Tech opportunity a year ago. And in the feedback that we got, we were not awarded the opportunity, but in the feedback we got, it was very interesting feedback. We had a very stacked team. All right. I mean, I had a software engineer from Syracuse with 20 years of experience. I had another developer that was fluent in 7 coding languages and had worked for AWS for the better part of a decade. And then we also had a consultant that worked under the Undersecretary for Defense. So we had a very stacked team. And the review coming out, the feedback coming out of the Army X-Tech program said, solid team. We don't see that you have a Crunchbase profile. And if you're not aware, Crunchbase is kind of a public profile for funding. And therefore, when you talk about your financial stability and interested investors, it's very hard to verify that. So therefore, we cannot confirm that you are financially stable. So when I read that, it was interesting because historically, I've never been a company that published anything. We have no social media presence. We very much kind of operated under the radar, and I never even thought to publish financials or everybody that was interested in investing in any company. And yet now you have accelerators like an Army X-Tech saying, hey, we don't see this, so therefore we can't verify. So the venture capital firms coming in, it's just an interesting way to look at it because, like I said, the government is kind of using them, from my perspective, to de-risk their investments. And then when you start really looking at that, the venture capital firms are layered, right? They're very layered. And if you take the drone dominance program, for example, 3 of the 25 invitees to the Drone Dominance Phase 1 are funded by the same VC firm. So now you have the same VC firm funding across multiple companies within the same industry, within the same space, within the same kind of direct or indirect competitive market. And then you also have a lot of these funds that have quite massive experience with government contracting, policy influence, policy decision making, and so forth. So it's a very layered approach right now.
And what do you think the result, if this keeps playing out, what do you think is going to happen? We're missing competition, or we're not getting a look at the real innovative technology that's not VC backed? What do you see happening?
No, I do think that the VCs serve a great purpose in identifying major opportunities for technology, right? They identify the unicorns, so to speak, of the industry. So I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to prevent the industry from continuing to advance. What I don't think it's going to do is really change the game of the industry, right? So we're not seeing a complete replacement of large primes with true startups, right? That are really entrepreneurial and scrappy and so forth. What we're seeing is a kind of a semi replacement of the primes with major venture-backed companies that are also simultaneously backed by a lot of the large primes. And so when you've got companies like Lockheed Martin, Booz Allen Hamilton, AeroVironment, where they've now formed these venture arms themselves and they're investing in these new companies, to me, that doesn't promote a lot of change in the industry. That's not to say that technology isn't going to advance, because a lot of these companies are being able to do that. It's just that it's really not changing the political dynamic of the industry as much as I think people seem to think it's changing.
Yeah. Interesting. So you got a really good view of the industry, and you've learned it the hard way. How do you view as a woman in defense tech? I mean, it's clearly a male dominated industry, and you're not in the Beltway, right? You're not a career in Lockheed and you spun out and set up your own company. You're a real entrepreneur. How do you carve out your space?
Husband office most often tells me that I chose to pursue the path, literally the hardest path in any industry that I ever could have, because not only am I not, a normal in the space, but I have no background, no engineering whatsoever. So I'm kind of a masochist. As far as being a woman in the space, yes, I absolutely am. I am at a little bit of a disadvantage, right? I don't have the experience. I don't have the connections that most people coming from the space do. I'm not a part of the club, right? And then also there's been times where I've not been taken as seriously, right? Well, you've never been downrange, so how do you know what you're doing, and so forth. And I've also been questioned on things that probably a man would not have been questioned on. However, I've really, really tried to say, okay, how can I also use some of this to my strategic advantage, right? Instead of kind of focusing on all those things, which those just come with the territory, that is what it is. How can I use some of these other things as strategic advantage? So, I mean, the easiest thing is I stand out in the space. I'm a little bit more memorable, right? So when I'm at a trade show, when I'm at Soft Week, when I'm at a GSOF event in Bucharest, Romania, I have different conversations because I either approach or get approached in a different way, where people are going to remember me 3 months later out of a stack of business cards this big, right? It's easy for them. The other thing that I would say is I used the lack of experience and the lack of knowledge to my absolute strategic advantage, insofar as I have nothing but objectivity, right? I've never been downrange. I didn't serve in the military for 25 years, so I don't have that level of subjective thinking. So when I would go to work with Warcom, or I'd go to an Army SMU, I could say to them, tell me what the problems are, help me understand. And what it allowed me to do was position myself as a collaborator rather than another vendor, right? I wasn't coming in saying, well, this is how I did it, and this is why this is going to work, and this isn't how it's going to work. I could actually say, why don't we try it both ways? And then we'll figure it out. And I think that was one of the things that helped me, because I was never seen as, well, they're just going to be a vendor trying to sell me something. I really tried to position it as, I am a female. I am trying my hardest, and I'll do anything I can to try to build you a great capability if you give me the chance. And that, I think, was what kind of opened the doors that I was able to open.
Good for you. Good for you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So this is a hyper evolving sector. We've had a few other guests that are in this space, and there's a lot of different takes on it. And this is the future of GovCon we're talking about. Now, I want to talk about this UAS space, and where do you see it? How do you see this space evolving over the next, let's say, 3 years? And what do we look like? It's 2029, okay, and Ukraine has hopefully come and gone. We've learned a lot from there. And I mean, of course, the Middle East is back. It's busy again. The way we fight, the doctrine is changing because of the way that UASs and drones are being used. We had a guest, Mike from Purple Rhombus, talking about the drones are being reclassified as expendable and basically like ammunition. So 3 years from now, how do you see this space? What do we look like?
That is a loaded question. And I look at it from two very different perspectives, because starting in the space in 2015, as I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, there were, I want to say, over 200 quadcopter companies that came into the space trying to compete with like 3DR, which was 3D robotics. DJI was really coming onto the scene, and they were very well funded, and they're not here today, right? So part of me wants to say it's going to be interesting to watch all of the companies that right now are very hot and heavy in the media, very well venture backed with obscene amounts of money, but look at that with very measured expectations, because not all of them are going to survive, right? At the same time, because of the rapid change and almost 180-degree difference in the way that the DOW is looking at things, and they're saying, no, we don't want expensive legacy systems. We want cheap. We want things that if they crash and go away, we can literally pull 27 others off the shelf or out of a box. That changes the ability to sustain and endure for a lot of these companies. I think in 2029, we are going to see more and more companies pop up that really support this level of adaptability, agility, kind of this whole expendable concept. But I think the ones that truly survive are also going to be the ones that allow the end users and the operators to sustain at the edge. That's kind of where we're getting, but you're seeing this stuff come out of the 101st. You're seeing it come out of the 25th ID. You're seeing it come out of even some of the Navy branches and so forth, that they're wanting the capabilities, but now they're wanting the ability to mend them, fix them, repair them, rebuild them on their own time whenever they need it, and that there's not a complicated supply chain and logistics change. So I think the companies that will endure are the ones that not only can build the product, but they can build the model where they aren't necessarily in the loop the entire time. Not to mention, we see a lot of our soldiers building their own stuff, right? So at what point, if more and more people out of 5th Special Forces Group or 101st are building their own quadcopters, is there a need for industry? At large volumes, absolutely. They cannot produce 10,000, units a month. But at what point do they look at just manufacturing entities rather than actual product developers? That's a little bit of an unknown and to be determined. So the way that we're really going to be able to sustain that is if you're a product developer, but then you're also more of a sustainer for them at the edge.
You got to understand that end users' challenges and adapt. You can't just push a product on them and
Exactly.
Hope they use the life cycle the way traditional products have been used, right? You got to think through the whole life cycle. Fascinating. We like to wind up with one word.
Okay.
One word, like just to summarize. And I see you as a defense tech entrepreneur. I see you as an innovator in this UAS space, and I also see you as someone that's you're getting heavily involved in AI, transatlantic, NATO, so kind of a global view. Give me your word. Describe your gut feeling about kind of where you see your slice of the industry going. This kind of UAS, AI. What's the one word you would use?
I would say convoluted. And that's not to sound negative or pessimistic. It's just a very convoluted industry, and it's become even more convoluted in the last 5-6 months after we've seen a lot of this like rapid change. And if you kind of go back to what we were originally talking about, you've got your large primes. They're not going away. It doesn't matter how many white papers people write or blog posts they talk about how we need more agility. The primes are not going away. The primes are then getting smart and saying, okay, well, if we can't beat them, let's join them. So then they've started their venture arms and they're investing in a lot of these new companies, which is still, kind of having that same landscape. As I said, we also have venture firms that are very layered. They're very connected. They've got a lot of policy influence. A lot of them are connected to this administration and so forth. And so we're going to see a lot of convolution, especially as these companies not only try to serve the American market and really push this pro-America, pro-USA, pro-manufactured in America narrative, and rightfully so, but then how they also try to then export, via FMS to other countries. But then we see these other countries saying, well, hold on, we can stand up our own capabilities.
You are.
See it in
right?
Ukraine. Exactly. There are a lot of NATO's companies saying, we're a NATO company. Why can we not build something that is equally capable? And maybe there's a concept of when NATO builds together, or when the West builds together, the West wins together. So I think that just adds a lot of dynamics. And like I said, it's not to be negative. It's just when you've got multiple players, but then still the same very few players, if we're going to be very honest about it, where does that all go? And how do you actually bring in a lot of these entrepreneurial companies? There's one company in particular right now that I know has a major opportunity with the United States government, and they're 15 people and they are not venture backed. It is the only company that I know of right now. So the more we see these venture companies and the more we see all of these, weird connections from one company to another, it makes it a very convoluted area.
Well, I will say this, and I say it with a level of confidence, and I agree, convoluted. That's probably one of the best words I've had yet on the show. But
Thank you.
when things are convoluted, what's going to allow people to win and succeed is grit and determination, smarts, ability. And there's no doubt in my mind that you got that in spades and you're going to win.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll hold you to this. So in the day when I feel like I'm not winning, I'm going to come back to you and say, Jake, can you please send me a reminder of what you said to me?
You just
about my dinner.
Just stick to it. I can feel it. You're going to be successful.
Exactly.
Callie, thanks so much for calling in. It's just good to get to know you through this process. And I love fellow GovCon entrepreneurs. It takes a special gut, a special grit to not only endure, but to win. And so I'm real proud of you. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm flattered to be here. It's an absolute delight.
So folks, if you want to reach out to Callie on LinkedIn, check her out. She's got a couple of cool companies she's working with. You can learn more. To our audience, make sure you tune in next week. We got a really cool guest coming on, and share with your friends. Tell them what we're doing. Meet more outstanding, interesting people like Callie on the Future of GovCon. We'll see you next week. All right, so thanks for joining me on another episode of the Future of GovCon. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and some of the bold predictions. If you did, take a second, share it on your social media, subscribe on YouTube. If you have any ideas for future guests or topics you'd like to have covered, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always there, and you can always learn more about precision talent solutions at pts.careers. Look forward to seeing you next week on our next episode.